Tonight, pressure on the government as new figures show a record number of migrants crossed the English Channel in the first 3 months of the year. New figures show 4,644 people have made the journey during 2024, with more than 300 crossing yesterday. The government accepts we're in the middle of a migration emergency, but if its Rwanda policy was supposed to be already acting as a deterrent, why isn't it working? We'll go behind the figures to show you one of the crossings last week. The story of a family from Kurdistan living in Germany for years, but threatened with deportation. They've now made it to the UK and they want to stay here. Have the Conservatives got to admit they've lost control? I'll ask the new party chair, vice chair I should say, Jonathan Gullis. Fears tonight from housing campaigners that Michael Gove's plan to reform the system and help renters and leaseholders is about to crumble away. And Avengers Assemble will discuss MP dream teams. Our superheroes tonight, Lord Vaizey and James Schneider, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Wednesday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. If historical precedent is anything to go by in an election year, right now you'd expect the polls to be narrowing, but they're not. If anything, they're moving in the opposite direction. The gap between Labour and the Conservatives is growing, not shrinking. Professor John Curtis, the man who the phrase election guru was invented for, currently puts the chances of a Labour victory at the next general election at 99%. 99%. So what's going on? Why aren't the polls narrowing? Well, I've got a theory. We're underestimating the impact of Rishi Sunak's failure to meet his 5 pledges, the criteria that he's asked us all to judge him on, after all. Other than the promise to halve inflation, a pledge that he is meeting, it is not a pretty scorecard. Growth, flatlining. NHS waiting lists not coming down. Debt has gone up, not down, since he promised to reduce it as well. And there is nothing that symbolises Rishi Sunak's failure to deliver on the pledges more than the vow to stop the votes. Yesterday, or today I should say, new figures show that 2024 has been the worst year yet for the number of migrants crossing the Channel in small boats. So I feel like the impact of the Prime Minister's failure to meet the pledges is being underestimated. As the pollster James Johnson points out, the PM doesn't deliver his promises is one of the most common reasons that people give in focus groups for switching away from the Conservatives. If you fail to deliver on 4 of the 5 pledges you've made to the country, well, you can't be that surprised if the country doesn't then vote for you. We've got our special reports on the crossing last week in a moment, but first we can talk to our political correspondent Tamara Cohen about those migration figures. It's pretty stark.
It is. Figures from the Home Office show 4,644 people crossed the Channel in the first 3 months of this year. What does that represent? Well, more than last year and a lot more than the previous years, but more than 2 years ago, which is important because the government had hoped 2022 would be the peak, and they've just exceeded those numbers. So when you're a Prime Minister who's promised to stop the boats and the numbers seem to be going in the wrong direction, inevitably you will get blamed, especially as Conservative MPs are just heading out on the election campaign trail for the local elections. We've just seen a tweet from Robert Jenrick, who resigned as Immigration Minister, saying that the government's immigration policy now seems to represent the triumph of hope over experience. And I think there's a lot of despondency among Conservatives I've spoken to that they are going to get a grip of this issue. All hope now hinges on getting flights to Rwanda. The Home Office say they think these numbers are unacceptable and they want to see those flights take off, but the legislation that could possibly make it happen is not going to be looked at again until after the Easter holidays because of a number of defeats inflicted on it in the Lords. So time is ticking down, and that remains a pledge that Rishi Sunak's not delivering on.
Yeah, and the pledge, obviously, to stop the boats as well, something that I think many people would question whether that is achievable at all. Tamara, thank you very much indeed. Tamara Cohen there. We've been talking an awful lot about numbers on the show so far, but behind every number is a person or a family with their own set of reasons for making the perilous journey across the Channel in another overloaded dinghy. Well, our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins caught up with a family of 4 who paid thousands of euros to do just that.
In this hostel in France, the atmosphere is nervous. A father and his family are waiting for a call. a sign sea conditions are right. It's finally time to go. After fleeing from Kurdistan, this is what lies ahead. A potentially fatal crossing to the UK, provided by smugglers who value money over life.
We don't have any other option except this dinghy. The surveillance for the trucks crossing the channel is very strong, and that is why we have to take this journey. We will either die or succeed.
To tell their stories safely, they're in disguise and we've changed their names. The UK wasn't their destination of choice. For years, Germany was their home, but then, threatened with deportation, last month they ran again, ripping teenager Sarah away from her friends and school.
I really miss it. I mean, the days where I go to school, this is now 2 months ago. When I thought about that, I was like, I can go to school. This makes me pretty sad.
Despite promises to stop the boats, a record number of migrants have crossed the channel this year. Last week, the family joined them, cramming into a rickety vessel with 60 others, low on fuel and life jackets.
It was a difficult and dangerous journey that no one was expecting to survive. We were all thinking that our lives would end in a matter of seconds.
Children, we had 4, they were crying, so I was like, please God save us, and I was very scared to die.
Now in the UK, they wait to hear their fate. Fresh threats of deportation or being sent to Rwanda weren't a deterrent.
How does the UK stop people from coming on that route?
You can't stop it. You can't stop it. This is smuggling and it will continue.
This family hopes they can stay. It isn't a guarantee. And while the UK wasn't their first choice, they say it's their last hope. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
Siobhan Robbins reporting there. We're going to talk more about the migration story with our next guest, the new Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, Jonathan Gullis. But before we do, I just wanted to bring you up to speed with another story that's gathering some momentum here in Westminster. And that's Labour's reluctance to commit to the Conservative policy to extend the 30 hours of free childcare to parents of children aged between 9 months and 2 years old by 2025. Last night, the Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, wouldn't commit to it and says the policy needs reform as childcare providers say they may struggle to provide that level of care. I asked Conservative Deputy Chair Jonathan Gullis what he made of it all. Thanks very much for being on the programme tonight. It's good to talk to you. We've just been talking about the government's childcare offer, the fact that it's unclear whether Labour would keep the plan for extended free hours of childcare. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think it's absolutely appalling that the Labour Party would pull the rug under hardworking families up and down this great country at a time when they need certainty. They're making plans right now based on the Chancellor and the Prime Minister introducing these 30 hours free childcare for 9-month-olds up to 4-year-olds. And essentially, Labour has now told parents that that deal necessarily won't be on the table. Not only is that damaging to 1.5 million families across the country, but it means that the OBR have said themselves that 60,000 families could now be impacted by this. That's 60,000 working people who may not be able to enter the job market because of a Labour, yet again, busy sniping from the sidelines, but having absolutely zero plan of their own in order to how to support working parents, working families up and down our country.
At the same time, though, Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, she's just said that the programme requires reform. And there are a lot of people who think, yeah, it does. You know, it's unclear if parents will be able to access it, whether it's going to be properly funded, whether there'll be enough nursery staff members to actually get the policy up and running. So surely it's fair enough that they say that they've got to look at it and see if it requires reform.
Well, it's simply a lame excuse from Bridget at the end of the day and Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party. Ultimately, the Chancellor has introduced a system that's staggered over a period of time up to 2027-28 to make sure that, one, having consulted with the industry, that we can put in the right incentives in place to bring more people into the workforce, to give more certainty over funding by introducing an increase to the average hourly rate and making sure that local authorities produce that average hourly rate quicker when it comes for childcare providers knowing what it is they're going to earn, as well as giving £500 million in the budget that we've just had in order to help fund that increase, alongside looking at ratios and reforms that we've made to that as well. So ultimately, the Chancellor is getting on with it. What Labour's proposing is taking £6,900 away from hardworking parents up and down our country, which is what we're preparing to give and going to give.
Just to jump in.
Sure they can look after childcare.
Am I missing something? Because they haven't said they're going to scrap it, have they? They're just going to say that reform might be required. Feels quite different, doesn't it?
Well, no, not at all. I mean, what we're used to with Labour is having zero plan whatsoever. And essentially all they've said is that they're not looking to commit to continuing that. And by not committing, that means essentially they're not going to continue anything. We have a general election later this year. Parents are making plans now. I've got my own 2-year-old who will be eligible for that first tranche of hours coming up. And I've already got my code from HMRC. I've given that to my childcare provider. There'll be many other parents doing that very thing right now as well. So ultimately, until Labour commits, we can only presume, and I think that's fair to do so, that they would cancel. And Labour's saying they want to see reform. Well, we've introduced those reforms. I don't really understand what Labour's waiting for, other than continuing to dither and delay as they always do.
OK. A record number of migrants across the Channel in small boats this year. New figures today show. Does this government have a grip on the UK border?
Well, I think it's very important to remember, Sophie, that the government's introduced a wide range of measures. So one of them was to do a deal with France, which saw 26,000 fewer small boat vessels cross the English Channel last year. We also know that returns agreements with places like Albania led towards a 36% reduction in small boat numbers arrivals over the entire course of 2023 compared to the 2022 year as well. But there is one big elephant, I should say, Sophie, in the room, which is the fact that I know, get the right animal, which is the fact that we have a very clear plan to get people deported to Rwanda, because if you enter this country illegally, you will not be able to claim asylum. But those pesky peers in the House of Lords, predominantly Labour, and Labour MPs and Sir Keir Starmer in the House of Commons are continuing to block any attempts that we make in order to get this Rwanda policy off the ground. Because one, it will act as an effective deterrent, but you need it, as with all the other measures, to make sure that we have that effective plans.
You abstained in the Rwanda vote, didn't you?
Well, actually, I voted in favour of the Nationality and Borders Act and voted for the Illegal Migration Act. And with the Rwanda bill, what I made very clear was that I wanted to see the bill pass. So I didn't block or deter it at any point.
But you suggested some
amendments. Well, I suggested amendments, Sophie, and obviously that's a matter of public record.
Did you abstain or not on the Rwanda bill?
Sophie, that's a matter of public record. I did choose to abstain on that particular bill.
So you're one of the pesky, you can't blame the pesky Labour peers. You didn't vote for it either.
I can actually, Sophie, because at the end of the day, I haven't voted, like Labour have, over 90 times to block the Rwanda scheme from being able to take place.
You abstained on it. You didn't vote for it. You can't think it was that great. You didn't vote for it.
Sophie, there's a very clear difference here between saying that you want something to work, you believe in Rwanda, as I do, and I want Rwanda to work, as I do.
Why didn't you vote for it?
The Prime Minister does. But obviously I had, with that particular bill, a couple of amendments that I wanted to see be adopted. They weren't adopted. I was true to my word that I said that I was going to not block the bill, unlike the Labour Party that continue to block it every turn, every corner. And I continue to believe that Rwanda will be the effective deterrent alongside the measures that we've already done, which is obviously making sure we get France stopping the boats from taking off and making sure we get returns deals with countries like Albania, which has seen a 93% reduction in Albanian arrivals coming here illegally. The Labour Party, what do they want to do, Sophie? They want to join the EU quota sharing scheme, which would potentially see over 100,000 illegal migrants come to the UK, on top of the ones that are already arriving illegally. Keir Starmer is Mr. Free Movement, let's not forget. So I won't be taking any lectures from the Labour Party.
Did you get it right the first time when you decided not to vote for the Rwanda bill, the Rwanda legislation, because you knew it wouldn't be a great deterrent? And look at it, it isn't a great deterrent. We've had record numbers of people crossing the Channel in small dinghies.
Sophie, I have never said anything along the lines that you've inferred. I've always said Rwanda will be an effective deterrent. All I've ever wanted to do is make sure that that deterrent is as strong as possible. And everything I've done is to make sure that we deliver the Rwanda policy, because I understand that important promise that we made on stopping the boats to the British people and the impact that will have not just on the electoral chance of the Conservative Party, but more importantly, about taking back control of our laws and our borders. The Prime Minister was brave enough to push ahead with the Rwanda scheme to make sure that we have the Illegal Migration Act. He's now doing what he's needed to get it through Parliament, albeit under Labour peers and Labour members of Parliament choosing to vote against, which I've never done, in order to stop and prevent this policy. Labour themselves have said they would cancel the scheme, even if it works. That is the definition of madness.
OK, you've recently been appointed to be Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party. Congratulations on your appointment. According to the former Conservative Minister Anna Soubry, your appointment is what desperation looks like.
Well, I think I responded to Anna in kind with the famous Nando's photo of the independent group or Change UK or wherever it was they were at the time. I won't be taking lectures from Anna Soubry, with the greatest respect. Look, I've been a member of the Conservative Party since I was 18 years old. I've been an association officer, a councillor, and now a member of Parliament. I've obviously been out with my members and across other members and across the country, delivering leaflets, knocking on doors. I'm proud of the Conservative Party and what we've done and what we've delivered. I'm proud of the fact that in Stoke-on-Trent we finally put it on the map by making sure we've had, as I visited today alone, a levelling up project thanks to the 56 million that the Prime Minister, who was then Chancellor, gave to Stoke-on-Trent, the largest of any area in the country to date, along with 500 Home Office jobs I'm visiting with the Home Secretary tomorrow, along with the reopening of Kidsgrove Sports Centre, which Labour shut because they couldn't be bothered to spend £1 to save it. I've seen firsthand the power of the Conservative Party locally here in the ground, as well as £200 million plus to improve roads and pavements across Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire, over £30 million to fix our bus services with new, cheaper fares and extended routes. So I've been working tirelessly to deliver on the funding that the Prime Minister himself has given, both as Chancellor and Prime Minister, to Stoke-on-Trent. And I look forward to doing battle with Labour in the future to make it very clear that they are the party of no aspiration, no plans and no care whatsoever for the people that I'm proud to serve. It's the Conservatives that have put Stoke-on-Trent, North, Kidsgrove and Torque on the map.
Well, you've certainly been hitting all of the Conservative Party's lines there. You haven't always been, I guess, the most loyal of MPs, I guess. You've always been someone who, I guess, is outspoken at times. It feels like you've gone from naughty corner to chief cheerleader.
Sophie, any differences I've ever had with the Prime Minister has always been about policy. I'm very clear that when it comes to my choice at the ballot box, as will many people, is who do I trust my children's future with? Sir Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak? And without a shadow of a doubt, it has always been, and I've always said this on any interview I've done, that it will be Rishi Sunak. Look, I'll tell you something about Rishi that not many people know. My son went into hospital last year and he was really struggling to breathe. And I only told one whip because I left the chamber and dashed on the car to get back up here to Stoke-on-Trent. At 10 o'clock that night, Rishi texted me to ask how my child was doing. He checked in again at 7 a.m. the next morning and 10 p.m. the next evening. And he did that day in, day out for 5 days in a row until my child was back home. That shows you the measure of the man. That shows you the decency, the humility, the father of not just his own parents, but the caring nature he has not for his colleagues as well as the country as a whole. And I will go into battle for him because I have been, as I've said, a member of this party since the age of 18 years old. I believe the Conservative Party is the force for the centre-right to bring about the change that's needed for this great nation. And I am fearful of a Labour Party that simply either try and copy what we're doing but claim they're not, or have no plan whatsoever and will risk my children's future, decimate the education system as they did before, end up like Labour-run Wales, which, by the way, is the blueprint under Keir Starmer, which is obviously an abomination when it comes to education standards, NHS, and many other factors with their dodgy 20-mile-per-hour zones all over the place. So let me be clear. There is only one party that can stop Sir Keir Starmer, and that's the Conservative Party, and that's Rishi Sunak is leading it, and I look forward to backing him in that.
OK, I hope your child is a lot better now, and there's nothing worse as a parent as feeling that your child is worrying about them and worrying about their health. Thank you very much for being on the programme this evening, Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Sophie.
Well, the debate over those migration numbers is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Daily Mirror's Associate Editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall Editor, Claire Ellicott. Well, let's get a quick thought from our duo for the evening, shall we? The Conservative peer and former Minister Lord Ed Vaizey and James Schneider, who is Director of Strategic Communications to Jeremy Corbyn when he was Labour leader. Good to have you both with us.
Thank you so much.
I am just trying to get my head around the facts why you would pledge to stop the boats when you cannot stop the boats.
Yes.
Was it a mistake?
Well, it was a mistake. I mean, I'm not sure I agree with your thesis that it's why voters are turning away from Rishi Sunak. I think the Conservatives have given voters lots of reasons, not least the kind of Tory civil war that's been raging since the Brexit referendum, really. But I do think it was a mistake. I don't see there's anything wrong with a politician offering promises and trying to keep them. But he drove himself into a cul-de-sac. He made the issue much more salient than it needed to be. I'm not saying it wouldn't be salient given the figures that you've just been talking about. And as you say, it's a very tough target to meet.
What do you make of Labour's position on all this?
I'm not sure what Labour's position on all this is. It's to sort of duck for cover and let the government make a mess of it and go, oh, well, we would do it better. Fine. But, and that will function as a strategy. I mean, look, John Curtis said there's 99% chance Labour is going to win, and that is basically because Labour has stood out the way and let the Tories implode, and that's what's going on. And part of it has been to do with the small votes. I basically agree with Ed that it was a mistake for them in kind of a political calculus sense. But I think they did it because they thought, well, we need one big thing to hold everything together in the way that Get Brexit Done did in 2019. And of course, it did work for John Howard in Australia. So they thought, well, we'll do that again. It will work over here. But I mean, it hasn't. It's caused them loads of problems. And I think also for a lot of the public, it's quite incomprehensible, like the arguments that they're having over this bit of Rwanda bill and that bit of Rwanda bill. It's quite hard to get to grips with it. And it's got that same kind of sort of intricate detail that the Brexit wars bit did.
Yeah.
But people didn't really have to follow it because they just know, oh, either it's happening or it's not happening. And in the end, they could vote for it. But people aren't going to vote to stop the boats in the same way to get Brexit done, especially when you haven't done that thing. I mean, Boris Johnson could go to the electorate and say, I have a deal, so it will do Brexit. Rishi Sunak can't go and say, I have stopped the boats, so I'll continue to stop the boats.
Or I have Rwanda. And you're quite right, the kind of esoteric debates.
Yeah.
And it was... I mean, I like Jonathan Gullis a lot, but it was quite amusing for him slamming Keir Starmer, and then you gently pointed out that he didn't actually vote for the Rwanda bill because he had a particular niche point that he wanted to make. And again, that's another example. I think you're absolutely right. People just... They want Get Rwanda Done, to coin a phrase, is basically what the public want to a certain extent. In some ways, the government has won the argument about Rwanda. There are people who think it is the right policy. They just cannot understand why they can't pass the legislation.
We'll have more from you both in just a few moments' time. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, support for NHS staff remains unwavering, but poor GP access, hospital waits and overburdened A&Es all contributing to the worst approval ratings in the service's history. So how do we restore faith in the NHS? Plus, why the promise to end a feudal housing system seems to have fallen flat. We'll hear from the social campaigner Kwajo Tweneboa about Britain's leasehold system, which looks to be going nowhere. And Avengers Assemble, why one group of Westminster big hitters have been compared to Marvel's League of stellar superheroes.
And now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
The biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits going in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients.
Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage.
The
world's largest falls, now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Hello, welcome back. Well, before we talk about migration, we've got some breaking news on Thames Water and its future, and we can go straight to our city editor, Mark Kleiman. Good to have you on the programme, Mark. What have you found out?
Well, Sophie, some big breaking news this evening on the future of Thames Water, Britain's biggest water utility. It has 15 million customers, employs 7,000 people around the country. Now, for months, Thames Water has been locked in talks with the regulator, Ofwat, about its future. And what I can reveal is that there has been a crunch board meeting of Thames Water's directors taking place today, and that tomorrow morning there will be an announcement from Thames Water that its shareholders are not going to proceed with a promised investment of up to £3 billion into the company to secure its future. Now, £750 million of that was due to be injected into the business this year. This was crucial because Thames is drowning under more than £15 billion of debt, and this will raise fresh questions about whether Thames Water can survive as a solvent independent company or whether it will have to be nationalised temporarily by the government. Now, that would be a huge political headache for Rishi Sunak's administration because it would come just months before the general election. It would ultimately cost taxpayers billions of pounds. Now, I should be clear, Thames Water is not tonight on the brink of collapse. But this announcement that will come tomorrow that shareholders are not minded to proceed with this promised equity investment deals a really serious blow to its future prospects. And I think we'll wait to see the detail of that announcement tomorrow morning, but really significant news about one of Britain's biggest utilities tonight.
That's a huge issue, isn't it? And as you say, it could be put billions of pounds of cost on the taxpayer, even though, obviously, say, a potential nationalisation is still far away. But it's been had a lot of difficulties recently, Thames Water.
Yeah, it has. I mean, Thames has had a terrible track record in terms of pollution and leaks. It's facing a number of regulatory investigations and fines that it's trying to secure concessions from Ofwat for. It also wants to impose a 40% hike on consumers' bills to help repair its finances. Ofwat has not agreed to those demands from Thames, which is one of the reasons why its shareholders have kind of reached the end of their tether and said, we are not going to proceed with this new investment unless there is some guarantee of a return on that investment. Thames Water shareholders are the likes of the BT Pension Scheme, China's Sovereign Wealth Fund, a big Canadian pension fund. These are all big investors in British infrastructure. And this decision that will be announced tomorrow will also raise further questions about the willingness of international investors to commit serious capital to Britain's major national infrastructure.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark Kleiman, City Editor there, first with that news on Thames Water. Thank you. OK, well, we've been talking migration figures so far this evening, and if you scan the QR code here, you can look at our pledge tracker, which is monitoring all of the PM's major pledges to see how he's getting on. We've been collating all the data to try and work that out. The other pledge that Rishi Sunak made, of course, or one of them, was on NHS waiting times, and we're talking the NHS now. Because whether it's the mad scramble to get a GP appointment when the phone line's open at 8 a.m, or knowing you need to take a phone charger to A&E because you're not going to get out anytime soon, it is no wonder that Britain's satisfaction with the NHS has reached a historic low. Polling does show that people still feel a deep affection towards the health service, though, and the people who work in it. Greg Milam reports.
It's GPs like Dr. Fari Ahmed who are at the sharp end of the growing dissatisfaction with the NHS, a practice that has 16,000 patients on its list, but which has seen funding fall and where they're just as frustrated as the people they serve.
I feel sad, but I'm also, not surprised. It really isn't rocket science. It isn't. If you fund the service less, you'll get less results. People are now, healthcare. If you get the preventative stuff done, if you work and put the funding early, you gain the rewards.
And the story here is playing out across the country. In January, for example, there were 4 million more GP appointments than there were in the same month 4 years ago. That despite the fact there are 3% fewer doctors to fulfil those appointments. The Royal College of GPs says it can't keep on doing more with less. It all feeds into a feeling of continual crisis. Among those who said they were dissatisfied with the NHS, 71% said it was because of long waiting times for a GP or hospital appointment. 54% said they were upset due to staffing shortages. And 47% said it was because of a lack of government spending on the health service. It is all a clear measure of the frustration people feel.
Waiting times for GPs are getting longer and longer. It's getting harder to see people. I still think when you get there, when you're having treatment, the staff are great.
I think it's quite frustrating to be angry at the NHS when you know that the issues there are not because of the work that they're doing. It's just the lack of funding.
Not getting paid enough, I think. Footballers kick a ball about and get loads of money. What do they get? Nothing, and they save lives.
And the report's author says this is about more than statistics.
What the survey doesn't measure is just the emotional cost, the societal cost of having an NHS that people are increasingly concerned might not be there for them when they need it. And I think if you speak to friends and family, if you speak to people working in the service, that's a real fear.
The Department of Health and Social Care pointed to what it said was record spending on the NHS and progress in cutting waiting lists and increasing GP appointments. The report did find strong support for the founding principles of a free NHS available to everyone. People don't want the model to change, it said. They just want it to work. Greg Milam, Sky News.
Right, let's get the thoughts of our duo tonight, shall we? Ed Vaizey and James Schneider. So people love the NHS, but they don't think it's doing a great job. Is that basically the nub of it?
That's the nub of it, and you can see why. The principle of having healthcare as a human right, that you aren't going to go bankrupt, that you can always rely on it, is one of probably the most civilised thing about our country, and it's a great thing that we won 75 plus years ago. That's why people have a lot of affection for it. But then people's experience of it over, we've had about 30 years of underfunding, part privatisation, and various botched attempts to reorganise it, all of which have gone basically against the principles which everyone can understand, which is if you have one health service which is buying medicines, it's buying medical facilities, it's going to be able to do it more cheaply than if it's split up into lots of different parts. And that principle has been undermined progressively. So that's why people are dissatisfied. You know why, exactly as you said. You scramble at 8 a.m. to get an appointment. Waiting lists are incredibly long. Of course, part of that is to do with COVID. But underlying that, that's the reason it's been such a big issue. That's why Brexit, the Leave campaign, campaigned on it. It's why Boris Johnson promised more hospitals. Of course, neither of them delivered those things, because people want to have and if you look at all of the polling, people want to have proper publicly funded healthcare, and that's what people deserve. That's why they have affection for it.
And it's another pledge that's problematic for the Prime Minister as well, to get NHS waiting times down.
Yeah, it is a massive problem again, but I mean, I've always been in favour of kind of radical reform for the NHS. I mean, I agree with James. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a human right, but I do think the principle that regardless of your income, you can get free healthcare at the point of need is a really important principle. But how you deliver that should be a much more kind of flexible thing. I mean, when people like James use the phrase part privatisation, I'm not sure what that means. I don't see any problem with a private company delivering me an NHS service, delivering me an operation. I remember vividly under the Blair government when I was a backbench opposition MP, independent treatment centres they brought in slashed waiting lists. You gave the task to private companies to do simple operations, cataracts, knee replacements, that kind of thing. The medical establishment drummed them out of the NHS. This model does not work. Keep the principle, reform the model.
I want to talk a bit about Thames Water as well. I just had that breaking news in from our city editor. What a mess.
It is a huge mess, but there's one thing I want to pick up on what both you and Mark said, where you said it's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money. That's only if we get a bad price for it. because in any nationalisation, the share price, you swap bonds, government bonds, for private shares, and the share price is set by Parliament. So all of the things that we've been hearing about their mismanagement, the lack of investment, the pollution, the huge debts, the year after year of paying out big dividends to shareholders while not fixing the pipes and leaking sewage into our water, that can be taken into account in the purchase price for nationalisation.
If it happens, I should say. If
it happens. So I think actually we should take their total failure, and it is a total failure, to run this industry as an opportunity to take it back into public hands, to run it for public interest, where we don't have to pay out huge debts. When these companies were privatised, they were given with no debts, with infrastructure that was relatively up to date. And we have seen the effect. Bills are higher, shareholders are paid
I think, first of all, it's a great scoop from Mark Kleiman, who's the best business scoop getter in the business. So just as a sign to that, sounds a bit frivolous to say it, but it is a great scoop. Secondly, if I was a politician, I'd say, don't worry, the taps are going to keep running. So the idea that Thames Water is going to close is obviously not going to happen. Thirdly, I think it's an interesting decision by the shareholders because it also puts their capital at risk. If the government has to take it into temporary ownership and then, as it were, resell it, people could lose, a lot of the investors could lose their money. The Thames Water story is not all negative. Don't forget the Thames super sewer. You're talking about sewage in the River Thames. They have built effectively the M25 for the sewage system in London. And it's not true that the infrastructure is up to date. A lot of the infrastructure in London and the surrounding area is Victorian infrastructure, which is unbelievably difficult to replace because you've got to dig up a road, put in a new pipe. It takes a very long time. I'm not saying that Thames Water is guilt-free, but it's not all a negative story.
OK, bit of disagreement on the panel. Never
That's
a bad thing.
Like.
That's what we like. We don't mind that. OK, thank you very much indeed, Ed and James. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, where the promise to end a feudal housing system seems to have fallen flat. We'll hear from social campaigner Kwajo Tweneboa about Britain's leasehold system, which looks to be going nowhere. And Avengers assemble, why one group of Westminster big hitters have been compared to Marvel's League of Stellar Superheroes. Hello, welcome back. Well, let's talk about another key Conservative policy now, the bid to end Britain's leasehold system. That task fell to government's resident problem solver, Michael Gove, who called the system nothing short of feudal. But today, his leasehold and freehold bill was dubbed an eviscerated shell of itself, failing to deliver on that promise. Here's what he had to say to me about the leasehold system back in January last year. As someone who, shall we say, has experience of the peculiarities of the leasehold system, I was quite struck by your interview with the Sunday Times where you said you wanted to abolish it.
Yes.
Are you hoping for that to happen before the election?
Yes. We want to introduce legislation in the final parliamentary session, so later this calendar year, in order to change the leasehold system. It's not easy in legal terms because, when you've got a tangle of property laws going back hundreds of years, unstitching all of that is difficult. But the fundamental thing is that leasehold is just it's an unfair form of property ownership. In crude terms, if you buy a flat, that should be yours. You shouldn't be on the hook for charges which managing agents and other people can land you with, which are, gouging.
Well, it seems pretty clear that that aspiration to end the leasehold system before the next election is not going to happen. Earlier, I sat down with a housing campaigner, Kwajo Tweneboa, who told me that housing needs to be at the top of the political agenda. Thank you so much for being on the programme. It's always great to speak to you and get your perspective. So we've heard, of course, that Michael Gove's planned reforms to the leasehold system are being watered down. He, of course, wanted to cap ground rents. What's your reaction to it?
It's disappointing. It would have been extremely hard, and what we've seen is it's been hard for him to get this through without being watered down, and we saw similar with the Renters Reform Bill. And I often talk about renting, I talk about social housing, but one of the biggest scandals at the moment is with leasehold, it's with ground rents, it's with service charge. And looking at the stories today in the news and the papers, the fact that leaseholders are worrying about having their homes repossessed if they missed a bill of only £350 off of the back of a cost of living crisis, I think is absolutely obscene. I think there has to be more support there for leaseholders. They're not enough, and it's causing misery for so many up and down the country at the moment.
Is this just another example of reforms to the housing system that are announced, that are planned, crumbling away as soon as they hit the first hurdle?
I think so. I really do. Tackling this sort of housing crisis, including the leasehold scandal at the moment, isn't something that's going to be fixed overnight. What I've always been clear about, though, it's going to take huge reform, and that fundamentally is what's needed. These policies, it won't be successful if all of these policies are watered down, but what we're seeing with leasehold at the moment is that's the case. It is being watered down, and there's now question marks over whether it's going to be enough to create the change that is needed for so many leaseholders up and down the country. We're seeing the scandal with service charges at the moment. It's not only ground rent that leaseholders are currently worrying about, it's also service charges. I've spoken to some myself in the space of a year, seen it increase by hundreds of pounds. And we all know, we've all been through the cost of living crisis altogether. We know our bills have gone up, the cost of rent have gone up, everything else included. And that's the same with leaseholders. They are now worrying that they're going to have their homes repossessed off of them by freeholders, and it's almost as if they're at the mercy of these freeholders. They say jump, leaseholders are expected to say how high, and fundamentally I think there has to be intervention, there has to be reform, and there has to be more support for leaseholders out there.
I'm interested to get your perspective on Michael Gove, because you know him, you've worked with him before. He seems as a bit of a reformer. How much of a personal disappointment do you think this will be to him?
It would have been huge for this to be a success. Having had meetings, and listen, I'm not here to pour glitter on any sort of politician, any MP or anything, but from my meetings with him, I do believe that he wanted to create changes, whether it comes to the Renters Reform Bill, Social Housing Regulation Bill, but also leasehold reform too. So if it is the case where it is being watered down in the way that's being suggested, I do believe he will be disappointed. I think perhaps he's going to have to take a firmer stance. Ultimately, we need reform to be as strong as possible. Consecutive governments have let leaseholders down, they have let renters down, and ultimately we now find ourselves in a situation where we have some of the worst stock in Europe, for example, and it is going to take drastic reform to fix that. He's tried to table this and bring it forward. He's obviously struggled. So I do think personally he will be disappointed, but we're going to have to think about alternatives. We're going to have to think about how do we make this cross the line? How do they make sure that it has the best impact it possibly can? Because for so many people, they are looking towards government now and in just absolute obscene misery.
And then just zooming out for a minute, how big an issue do you think housing is going to be at the general election? And I'm also interested to get your thoughts on whether Labour's being ambitious enough on housing.
I've made it clear, housing, I believe, has to be top of the agenda when it comes to the next general election. Housing isn't a sort of lone issue. When we think about it, housing affects the lives of every single individual up and down the country, whether you are homeless or whether you live in a 5-bedroom home, whether you're a leaseholder or whether you're a renter, whether you're living in social housing. And it doesn't just affect that, it affects kids, it affects their education, it affects the NHS. And we've seen that with social housing, the amount they've had to spend on looking after people living in poor conditions. And for generations, we've seen that housing has never been at the top of the political agenda if it's not them promoting home ownership. They've not talked about leasehold in the way that they should have. They've not talked about social housing, which is the bedrock to this crisis at the moment and the heart of this crisis. And they've not talked about renters reform. And so many people up and down the country, their housing is impacting their lives, is causing them misery, and they are struggling with their bills. I fundamentally think we need the next government to be radical with reform when it comes to housing. If they cannot talk about improving the country's productivity, improving the country's labour force, if people are living in unsafe, undecent homes or struggling to pay their bills or are at risk of homelessness, they cannot do that. And I think the same message has to go, whether it is Conservatives or whether it is Labour. I think pressure needs to be applied equally, because the next government is going to have to take drastic action in several areas across housing to really fix it.
Do you think they get it from what you've seen from the Labour Party and the Conservative Party? But I guess I'm talking about the Labour Party for a minute now. Do you think they get what you're just saying?
It's hard. It's difficult. I've been in meetings with Michael Gove, that's the thing. And I've put these issues forward. I've shown him, I know that he has seen it. But again, it takes a whole party. When it comes to the Labour Party, they're talking a lot at the moment. They're telling us, especially around social housing and renters reform, that they're going to do X, Y, and Z, but we're not really seeing the details at the moment. Are they going far enough? Am I convinced they're going far enough at the moment? No, is the answer. In relation to the crisis that we're seeing and the scale of the crisis, are they tabling enough of a sort of radical approach to tackling it? I don't believe so, but I don't think any party is at the moment, and they're going to have to, because the whole country is looking towards them in relation to housing, because so many people are being impacted by it.
It's a very powerful rallying cry. Always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up next on the Politics Hub, we're going to have more from these two. Plus, Avengers assemble, or should that be liaison committee assemble? We'll hear who's compared a group of Westminster politicians to the League of Superheroes. Very similar, I'm sure.
Well, we don't know from the study fully quite what they made as being lifestyle changes, of course, alongside. People make good changes after they make good exercise changes. So if you are exercising more, you tend to have a little less alcohol, you drink less in the evening, you eat better diet and so on. But the key thing really is when you start to get yourself moving, when you start to get outside walking, that's what the participants were doing in the research study, you're raising your hormone levels, you're raising your serotonin levels. And that's quite important because serotonin is a precursor to melatonin, and melatonin makes us fall asleep. So by the nature of just literally moving somewhat frequently, you're changing your hormone structure, you're increasing your blood circulation. You're also, of course, burning off some energy, so you're going to get more tired by the evening and fall asleep more quickly. So there's a few things all combined together. But as I say, people do make great changes in their lifestyle alongside exercise changes. It's a real trigger to making positive overall life balance movement. So the test results are not entirely surprising. It's good to get reinforcement of the fact that it's another good reason to get out there and do some exercise. I'd say that the that small amount per week is a nice start point. And in reality, we're designed to work much more than that. We should be working in some form 4 or 5 days per week, even on a low level of going for fast-paced walking, this zone 2 cardio training approach, where you're working at a medium level. It's great for us, both in terms of hormone balance, in terms of our overall sense of well-being. We do have a need to try and create hormone release in our system. And part of the way of doing that really is not just this exercise of going for low-grade cardio, but lifting heavy things, moving heavy objects, being tested. Our bodies are designed to be tested regularly. And without that, we just start to work into a different life pattern. And our sleep cycles rely on that exact setup. Always lifestyle changes produce this very nice upward spiral of effect on your system. So the more that you do, the more you want to make changes, your body's allowed to make changes, it grows to make changes, and then it gets easier and easier, results get better and better. And likewise, when you do nothing, it spirals downwards in the exact same way. So we've got to make sure we have your positive action plans. And yes, what's important too is overnight, if you're not sleeping well, you can't reproduce another hormone, cortisol. And we need cortisol, it's our stress hormone, to feel awake and feel alive and feel regenerated. Now, without good sleep, you can't get that. So you start the day feeling tired and you reach for what? More coffee, more sugared foods to get a bit of a kicker. And then you're fighting a battle all day.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, to tell you about the latest instalment of electoral dysfunction. Each week, Beth Rigby, Jess Phillips and Ruth Davidson are unravelling the spin in politics. On the agenda this week, Chinese hacking of British politicians and voters. But also, mighty, fearless and possessed of a unique set of powers. In a democratic sense, they are the Liaison Committee.
The liaison committee, for you all out there, is when the heads of different select committees, so these are backbench committees where MPs quiz politicians, cabinet ministers basically on policy areas, the heads of all those committees go into the super committee and then they ask the Prime Minister questions. It's called the liaison committee. I don't know why we can't get better descriptions for what these
Justice League,
are.
we call it the Justice League Committee because it's like all the superheroes in one room getting to take on the baddie. I love the liaison committee. It's literally my favourite.
It's so powerful because we've got them in Holyrood and other ones have it as well. And as a way of holding people to account because the Premier, the First Minister, Prime Minister, whoever it is, doesn't always have to come to committees to be questioned on a particular issue. But if they choose to go, they know what the issue is, so they can gen up on the issue. You go to a liaison committee or you go to the heads of all the committees committee, whatever it's called in any of the administrations, you have literally zero idea who's going to ask you what. You can be asked anything about anything. It's the toughest gig you can possibly do in politics.
And if you scan the QR code that's on screen now, you can listen to the latest episode of that new podcast, Electoral Dysfunction. I need to get more used to saying this. You can also get it wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also watch the Liaison Committee in action as well, as they were yesterday, grilling Rishi Sunak, the Avengers of Westminster, as Ruth Davidson put it. That is Rishi Sunak, obviously, but there they are, the Avengers. There they are. The heads of the select committees assembling together. Right, back to Ed and James for the last time tonight. What do you reckon then? Are they just like the Avengers, the Liaison Committee?
Yeah, I think Bernard Jenkin and Mark Ruffalo, if you put, we've never seen them in the same room together, and there's a reason for that. They could actually be the same person. Scarlett Johansson and Caroline Dinenage, have you ever seen them in the same room? No, you haven't. They could be the same person. So there is a lot of physical resemblance between some of the incredibly well-toned, stunningly good-looking chairs of these select committees and some of the actors who play the Avengers.
Absolutely, and they're kind of going around, I'll be honest, I'm not a massive Avengers fan, I don't really know that much about it, but, the kind of superheroes solving problems, beating crimes, it's just like the select committees, right?
Yeah, it sounds very exciting, although I'm much more impressed by Ed's audition for everybody out there for your new role as both casting director and executive producer in the new biopic of our household name select committee chairs.
Because you don't know who any of them are.
The select committee chairs? Yeah. No, not really. I know Diana Johnson, she's the Home Affairs select committee.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Yeah, I know that one. And most of the other ones I don't know, but I probably know about as many as the Avengers. I came here when I was told we're going to talk about the Avengers, and I asked basically everyone who are the Avengers, and everyone says, oh, Marvel, and then you ask them what's Marvel, and they don't know.
You can't pretend, because I grew up reading Avengers comics.
But you don't know who they are. I asked you about
that's because I was reading them 45 years ago. But you come on here and quote Jam lyrics at me, and you were born 20 years after the Jam broke up.
No, more like 10 probably.
I feel like I'm breaking up the conversation.
But I just want to
here.
give a big shout out to Beth Rigby. I mean, it's just a brilliant podcast, and she's one of the hardest working people in Westminster. Don't you think so?
You know what? You can come on here anytime. I can see your tactic.
Somebody may have
coming on here praising Sky journalists.
Somebody may have told me to say that.
This is a great patter. This is excellent. Everyone come. What did Tamara Cohen do wrong? She was on first. She didn't get the praise.
She didn't ask to be picked up on the politics up.
Amazing. Parliamentary superheroes. If you had to pick one, if you were, in a dark alley, you need Batman, Spider-Man.
Diane Abbott and Peter Bottomley and Harriet Harman. I venerate experience and people who plug at it. Diane Abbott, whatever you think about her politics, she's had a load of stuff thrown at her. She's a pioneer. Someone like Peter Bottomley, he's 71, still standing again, still lives and breathes his constituency and political life. Harriet Harman, she is standing down, but again, another great pioneer. Those are my heroes. Who are yours?
The staff that work in Parliament, the security guards and the chefs and the catering, they're all extremely helpful, very, very nice, and keep the place running.
There you go. They're great answers. Can I let viewers into a secret? Am I allowed to?
Of course you can.
What were you doing before you came here?
I was having a drink at the Garrick.
How was that?
I was making a field visit. I'm not a member.
It was obviously hit the headlines, the Garrick, because the membership list was published. No women at all allowed to be
Actually, maybe I'll be
Garrick.
cancelled just for simply entering the building.
Yeah, maybe you will. Although you were saying that you resigned membership of the Garrick.
Yeah,
right?
I was a member years and years ago for very boring and complex reasons. I did actually resign partly because I couldn't afford to be a member.
Not in protest of the membership then.
That's the news story.
And how was the atmosphere? How was the atmosphere in the Garrick?
They were all talking about the issue, actually.
Were they?
Actually, I probably shouldn't say that either. Now I won't be let back in the...
No, they're your banned.
It's all went through
Chatham House rules.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Oh dear, never mind. How about you? You been in the Garrick before?
I have not, no.
I haven't either. We need to try and get an invite.
You could be the first woman member.
I was going to say you could nominate me, but
Yeah.
I forgot you'd already resigned your membership and you're now banned.
We're blackballed from sitting near him. We shared a platform. It's a real problem.
That's it. Great to have you both. Very lively Politics Hub tonight. That is it from us tonight, but I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Lee.